All right, what's up, Notre Dame fans? We're actually here inside Notre Dame Stadium because it's April 1st and the weather in South Bend has still not turned to spring. I'm hoping maybe sometime this month, maybe for the Blue Gold game in this very building. We're probably just a few hundred yards away from the field itself. April 22nd, Blue Gold game. We watched an entire Notre Dame spring practice today. The first one that we've got to see and the only one that we'll get to see in its entirety from start to finish. So we're going to go over some things that we saw from the Fighting Irish today inside the Irish Athletic Center. They practiced inside for the entirety of the day as well. That tells you what the weather is like. This isn't about the weather though, Patrick. Let's talk Fighting Irish football. Kind of a tough day for the offense. Go to blueandgold.com later today and through the weekend. I'll have an article up charting every single pass from quarterbacks Sam Hartman, Tyler Buchner, and Steve Angeli. Those are the three guys that threw during the 11-on-11 periods. And I'll give away a little teaser, I guess. By my count, very unofficial count, but pretty accurate, I think. I was doing my best to chart everything. 15 of 34, and the practice actually ended with a Steve Angeli interception. He was looking for freshman wide receiver Braylon James on kind of a corner route to the back of the end zone. Back shoulder throw. Ryan Barnes picked it off. So, Patrick, I watched the offense. You watched the offense. What did you see? I didn't see a whole lot that was great.
Yeah, because there wasn't a whole lot, and that's just the simplest way to put it. And I know you still put all the qualifiers of like sixth spring practice. Yeah, sixth. It's not going to look 100% great no matter what. But my takeaway was the number one thing that I wanted to see in spring practice period was Sam Hartman kind of shredding things. And even though we weren't able to see some of these full practices before, you still saw some clips that Notre Dame tweeted out from the full team sessions that we were not able to see, where he's throwing it down the field on the money, making tough throws. So good early signs, kind of coming in thinking, all right, there's an expectation of him being able to repeat that, and you just didn't really see that from him or any of the QBs today. And it should be pointed out there were some struggles catching the ball, even though they were practicing indoors on this rainy day. But nonetheless, you still saw all the QBs, Hartman especially among them, just a little hurried, a little off timing, a little just kind of off kilter overall. Where, I mean, how many times did it felt like we see the same kind of, crossers or throws over the middle where even if there was a little pressure or you're off a little bit or there's, the window's not the biggest, where there's still, it's happening right in front of you. You've got enough of a window, especially for the ACC's all-time leader in touchdown passes, and just wasn't completed often enough. So it just a choppy day, all told, for the offense and the QBs.
I think it was timing. I think it was all of these Notre Dame players trying to assimilate into a new offense. I mean, this is Jared Parker's offense now, and kind of going off of that. And I know there's a lot of things that he wanted to keep the same from Tommy Rees, and a lot of it did look the same. I know there's probably a lot of Notre Dame fans out there that would be like, oh, no, I kind of wanted a change. But this has nothing to do with Tommy Rees. This was kind of just, I mean, how many catches did we see from Jaden Greathouse, who had a really nice day, the freshman wide receiver, but it was the same catch every single time. He was 2 or 3 yards away from the line of scrimmage. He kind of just ran this little bubble stop is what I would call it, just kind of floated out toward the guy that was covering him, turned around and said, hey, hit me here. And Sam Hartman, Tyler Buchner, they did hit him there. But if that's the only thing that this Notre Dame offense had going for it today, you do get a little worried because, like you said, Patrick, we saw the same thing over and over. Chris Tyree, who I think a lot of Notre Dame fans are excited about, running over the middle of the field, kind of a shallow crosser, probably 7 to 10 yards away from the line of scrimmage, right over the middle of the field. I mean, between the hash marks, and Sam Hartman threw it out in front of him. He threw it a little high. It was never really on the money. And these are throws that when I went back and watched all of Sam Hartman's games at Wake Forest, he makes that throw. Yeah, he's going to miss it once, twice in a game. He missed it 3, 4, 5 times in one practice. So it was a little head scratching. And then the only real deep shots that you saw took was the same little corner route. I think they tried to hit Deion Colsey on it a couple times, tried to hit the freshman RICO FLORES Jr. These are throws that they're hitting in the individual periods when they're running these routes on air, and it looks really, really good. All of a sudden, you put the Notre Dame defense up against these guys, and it was like a night and day. Speaking of the defense, though, Patrick, you kind of been keying in on them throughout spring practice. Few standouts. I mentioned Ryan Barnes. He was probably one of the better guys. What did you see overall from the Notre Dame defense today?
Yeah, you would kind of think like if if you would have told me, or I would have told you just beforehand, like, oh, the QBs are going to go by what you charted, 15 to 34, and it's going to be kind of a choppy day. Given who is in the Notre Dame quarterback room, you'd think, oh, it must have been a pretty good day for your defense, and it was good. It's a solid, successful overall, but nothing where it's like, oh my God, these guys are just overwhelming, or where Ben Morrison was getting a hand on every other throw, or where there were like 10 sacks in there or anything. Like, it's interesting. We talk about the offense choppy as a whole. I thought both tackles, Joe Alt and Blake Fisher, were their usual selves, which you kind of expect at this point, is two guys who could be NFL bound after their junior years this year. But not this like dominant defensive effort, but certainly a good one overall. You saw some good plays from the fifth-year linebackers, especially Jack Kaiser and J.D. Bertrand, just guys that don't necessarily need a whole lot of work in the spring, but who were productive when they did get it. You mentioned Ryan Barnes, a guy who, when you thought about the 2023 Notre Dame cornerback picture, I should say, not someone who really comes up, but a nice interception where he kind of ran a back shoulder route for, I believe it was Braylon James. Got a hand on a deep ball thrown earlier. A couple of good plays there in position drills. So just kind of an interesting note of like, all right, file away to see if he kind of makes a depth chart climb over the course of the next 5 months here, and just a productive practice for a guy who's kind of fighting for real positioning and just spots and any snaps he can get here after not playing for a couple of years. And then Javonte Jean-Baptiste, a grad transfer from Ohio State, kind of a guy who you really looking to see what can he add to this pass rush as a pass rush that's really looking for like replacing a lot of sacks. I thought you saw some good things from him. There was a rep in early in 11-on-11 where he actually got past Joe Alt initially, only to meet Audric Estime, who is not someone you want to meet as a defensive player in pass protection. We saw that a lot today and, of course, last season. But overall, some good signs for him and what he can, I think, bring as a pass rush. We heard both defensive coordinator Al Golden and Marcus Freeman mention in earlier spring availabilities how they're going to kind of rotate defensive starters every day, kind of pick who was going to get the first reps with the ones just based on who earned it in prior practices or workouts or meetings, whatever it might have been. And in that regard, it was interesting to see junior TUIHALAMAKA at Viper over Jordan Botelho, who, after the Gator Bowl performance that he had in place of Isaiah Foskey, kind of the guy we were all at least kind of highlighting as the probably most likely starter, or at least highest upside option of those Vipers, and being that he's also a senior who's been here for a little while and seemingly on more stable footing. So in that sense, even when we hear about like, all right, you don't want to just assume that, right, this is how it's been all spring, or that this position battle is over, especially when we just parachute into one open practice here. But when thinking about the pass rush and kind of what it really needs, and probably needing a big year of Botelho, probably a guy you wanted to see like be consistently earning those ones reps, but nonetheless still a good sign for TUIHALAMAKA to be there after not really making that full-time Viper transition until kind of late in the year, and really only getting extended run at that spot in a game in the Gator Bowl. So, and I thought he had a few decent moments there and a couple of good reps in offensive line one-on-ones. So kind of a spot that merits watching, not just for Botelho, but knowing that they would always need someone behind him anyway, and seeing just, all right, who's that kind of number two going to be, or will it be more of a 1 and 1A with Botelho, whether that's because he still needs a little bit more time to figure this out, or because one of those other guys is really surging. So probably a development that was, even before spring, kind of one you're really focused on just because of what the defensive line needs and what it loses in Foskey, but one to track really up until the opener.
Yeah, TUIHALAMAKA, one of those more talked about guys from the class of 2022. Probably a lesser talked about guy, just because with everything Notre Dame has at running back, is Jabron Payne. But I thought he looked pretty good today. And you have to realize that Logan Diggs has been out for a few practices in a row now. We don't know what his injury is. We haven't talked to Marcus Freeman since he started popping up in the street clothes last week. So we're not sure what he's out with. But since he's been out, and since Chris Tyree has basically moved to full-time wide receiver, we haven't really seen him work anywhere else this entire spring slate. It was Estime, and it was Audric Estime, who we mentioned earlier, and it was Jabron Payne. And Jabron Payne probably had the best play of the live period today, where he broke a run down the left sideline, probably for about 50 yards, and none other than Estime was the one that punched in the only touchdown of the live period a couple plays later. So Notre Dame, being that run-first team, especially with what we saw with the quarterbacks today. I think you still want to lean on those two guys. You definitely want to get Diggs back into the fold. Jadarian Price also still in street clothes. I know Marcus Freeman mentioned that he might be getting back to football-related activity sometime soon. He was wearing a T-shirt and shorts today. I don't think we're going to see much from him in the next 3 weeks by the time the Blue Gold game is played. So when you're looking at it from a running back perspective, you're going to see a whole lot of Estime this spring. You're going to see a whole lot of Payne. And until Diggs gets back, that's really all Notre Dame has at that position.
Yeah, and not that you want to see guys like get hurt or miss time, but from an individual perspective, that was probably the window Payne needed to make more of a case of how to get into what's going to be a pretty crowded backfield at full health when Diggs is back, when Price is fully recovered from that Achilles tear last year. But for a guy who I think can do some things in the receiving in the pass game, and who's got some speed and who's definitely bulked up since he got here last summer, this is probably the window that he really needed to make an impression, and at least from what we saw today in this one open practice that we'll see, I thought he did.
Yeah, the window is a really good way to put it, because when Tyree was still in that backfield, and then at this time last spring, when Jadarian Price was healthy, he was ahead of Jabron Pay, so he was like the fifth guy at this time last year. Right now, he's getting number 2 reps, which is vital. Like you said, I saw him run some routes in individual periods today, and I was like, whoa, Notre Dame might have something there as well. So there was some good, there was some bad. That's a spring practice for you. That's any practice, really. If you've ever played a sport, you know that there's some good and some bad. We'll be back. I'm actually not sure the next time. We have one more viewing.
April 14th for a limited viewing of 5 periods of practice there.
So one more time before the Blue Gold game on April 22nd. But make sure you go to blueandgold.com. We will have all sorts of recaps from today's entire 2-hour media viewing at practice. But until next time, I'm Tyler Horka. That's Patrick Engel.